This is Marco Reus.
This is Shinji Kagawa.
This is Nuri Shahin.
Hello, this is Jadon Sancho.
And you're listening to the Yellowwall podcast.
Hello and welcome to episode 373 of the Yellowwallpod. I'm your host Stefan Butzko, and today we will talk about Borussia Dortmund's 3-2 win against VfB Stuttgart and the second leg quarterfinal against Manchester City, and we will preview briefly Sunday's match against Werder Bremen, which will kick off the Englische Woche, where Dortmund will also play Union Berlin, and then I think it's against VfL Wolfsburg. So another all or nothing week, if you will, for the Black and Yellows. Anyway, for all that and more, joins me Lars Perlman. Hello, Lars. How are you doing?
Hello, Stefan. I'm doing fine, and I'm apologizing in advance for the shorter episode, which in this instance is wholly down to me.
Well, that's all right, Lars. You just got to keep it snappy. So, 3-2 win against Stuttgart on Saturday, a game that was very tricky, especially in the first half for the Black and Yellows. They were, I think, 1-0 down at halftime, but then turned it around quickly, only for Stuttgart to equalize again. But then Ansgar Knauf with his debut goal in Black and Yellow, a youth product, scoring for Dortmund obviously is always nice. Lars, how did you perceive this match? What were your expectations going into it, and what of those were fulfilled when you left it?
I mean, we know Stuttgart are a very good side for a promoted team especially, but also just in general. I think they're very much still in the hunt for 7th place, which might be a qualification spot for European football next season, depending on how the cup semi-finals and final will go. So obviously going away to them is always going to be a fairly difficult game, especially considering Dortmund had only just lost against Frankfurt, kind of the Bundesliga, at least in some quarters, considered to be over for Dortmund. And the Champions League game against Man City on the horizon. You could have understood, especially with this group of players and the precedent they have set a few times already, if perhaps they would have laid a bit of an egg in Stuttgart. But to their credit, I didn't feel like that was the case even in the first half. Obviously, they conceded the most obvious goal in the history of goals that they could concede. I mean, I'm sure in the preview and in team talks before, they all mentioned how you shouldn't allow Borna Sosa to cross with his left foot, and you definitely shouldn't have, I think it was Delaney and Guerrero on Sasha Kalajdzic, who's tall, a 2-meter tall striker who is not only tall but really good. Not only with his head, but also with his head. So when that ball flew in, I think Mo Dahoud actually said, don't let him cross it. And then as soon as the ball comes into the box, you basically know what happens, especially with Marvin Hitz in goal, who has a penchant for these lobbed headers or even shots, kind of finding his way over him and him looking a bit silly, even though I'm not necessarily ready to call that a goalkeeping mistake. Yeah, but I mean, they conceded that goal. Obviously, first half was tricky then, but I think the reaction shortly after coming out of the halftime break and also after conceding for the second time, that was the kind of mettle that they haven't shown on a consistent level, which is something we've criticized, but I think it's only fair to comment that when it's shown during a game.
Yeah, I mean, right out of the locker room, Dortmund turned it up quite well. Jude Bellingham, obviously I omitted that in the intro, but he also scored his first league goal, and it was quite a nice goal. So good for him to finally finding his scoring boots. Arguably already found them in the first leg against Manchester City. So if you would count that, he'd actually scored in 3 games in a row, which is unusual considering how Bellingham's shooting technique often has let him down in the past. Also nice to see that Marco Reus is on the scoring sheet. I think it was only his, was it his fourth or his fifth goal of the season? He has not scored.
Fourth.
Yeah, he has not scored many in the Bundesliga, which, for a player of his stature, it's not a high scoring season. Let's just put it this way. And then, of course, I felt like Daniel Didavi's goal was kind of coming in the 78th minute or so. I feel like Dortmund was taking the foot off the gas pedal a little bit too much there. But I think the reaction was great, and Lars, I think that Knopf goal took some real skill there.
Yeah, surprising in a way. I mean, his selection against Man City kind of showed, or the argument behind it showed his greatest strength, which is definitely his pace. I think he stretched Man City a few times in that game, and also in the second leg, which we'll talk about later. But also in the second leg, you saw a lot of the limitations that Knopf still has, and the reason why at 19 he's only just now making his first few steps at the highest level, whereas other talents at Dortmund, be that Bellingham or Gio Reyna or obviously Sancho, Haaland, and all the other guys, they have already all made more steps at the same age as that Knopf has. So given those limitations, I was quite surprised to see the nimbleness of his footwork in front of or ahead of that goal, and also just the finish. I mean, it wasn't shooting for the fences, if you like. It was really rather cool, calm, and collected. And because of that, I think that was actually one of the most nicely worked goals from an individual standpoint that Dortmund have had this season. I mean, they surely had a few even more spectacular ones and more important ones, but just for a young guy making his first few steps in the Bundesliga, to have the composure in that situation and to basically give Dortmund a win. You could debate whether that's much needed or too little too late, but still a win at Stuttgart is a pretty decent result for them and gave them a bit of a confidence shot, I'm sure, for the Man City game, in which I think you could see it, especially in the first, let's say 20 or 25 minutes, that there was actual real belief that they might pull the surprise or sensation, however you want to describe it.
Miracle. Yeah, no, Ansgar Knopf really did thread it through the proverbial needle there, because he just found that teeny tiny gap that you need to score, which I find was a really amazing goal. Now, if we skip ahead to Wednesday, we already knew that if Dortmund were to progress, they would not meet Bayern because they only had a 1-0 win against PG, which was not enough. Such a shame. But Jude Bellingham gave Dortmund a lot of hope in the 15th minute. A cracking goal. Really did not leave Ederson with much of a chance there, even though I think the City goalkeeper was still there. As you just mentioned, very strong opening 15 minutes by Dortmund, which is kind of to be expected. It's funny. I think at the beginning of the season, you always had to fear for the worst in the opening 15 to 20 minutes of this Dortmund side. They took things slowly, and I feel like now it's flipping a little bit, where they're often strong out of the gate and then, like it should concede the very first chance. I think overall, there's not much else to say than Manchester City were clearly the better team and did deserve to go through on the performances over both legs, especially the second half. I think City were just way too dominant for Dortmund to resist this pressure, but still, nevertheless, going into the locker room 1-0 up and being basically through is an achievement, something I did not necessarily expect for Dortmund to be still in it this way by that time. What did you make of this performance? I think I read you say that for Dortmund to pull this off, not enough players did show up, which I sort of agree with.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I definitely agree that the scoreline, even in the first leg, I think flattered Dortmund in a way. I think especially Foden arguably had enough chances to make the scoreline more comfortable for Man City in the first leg. In the second leg, definitely the first 20 or so minutes, surprisingly good in a way, considering the level of the opposition. Man City obviously kind of through their league game, if I'm not mistaken. They had a lot of changes personnel-wise, which, is only fair when you have that kind of talent sitting on the bench. I think Raheem Sterling played like 5 minutes against Dortmund. He would no doubt be Dortmund's best player at this point in the season. So that kind of shows the gap. And knowing that, definitely impressed with the way Dortmund came out of the gates. You already mentioned the nicely worked goal by Bellingham. Something nobody's really talking about is that big chance Akanji had just after the first goal, I think, if I'm not mistaken. After a corner swinging in from the left side, he basically had a free header. If that's 2-0, and knowing the history Man City have, as a club, there's a bit of a lack of history, you could argue, but over the last few years, under Pep Guardiola, going up by 2 goals, maybe that would have been, the psychological boost that Dortmund needed, or the downfall for Man City, who knows. Obviously, then they turned up the screws, and Dortmund kind of were lucky to go into the halftime break with their lead. I think they had goal line clearances of Matteo Murray. The cameras didn't really pick that up quickly enough, and I didn't see too many replays of that. There was also one by Bellingham, which showed his level of care and want, which some players just didn't really produce, especially in the second leg. I think they got very little out of Erling Haaland in both games. Obviously, that's rarely, if ever, down to the striker alone. If you don't get him involved, there's not much someone like Haaland with his playing style can do. But still, given how he's missed the Champions League and has his agents making field trips in the middle of April to sound out transfers that might be coming 18 months later, or no, not 18, but 14 months later or whatever, you could argue that he didn't really show up in these 2 games, and the same could be said for a few of the other guys. And when you play a team like Man City, much like Bayern or Paris last season, or Paris if they had met them again this season, there's not much room for error within Dortmund's capacity, and too many of them just didn't reach their level. And as such, it was a matter of time until City finally found that opening. Obviously, the way it came about with another stupid penalty conceded by Emre Can, that was really the frustrating part of this Champions League tie, in which over the 180 minutes, I think Dortmund did pretty well for themselves.
Yeah, if we talk about the Emre Can penalty, I think there was some controversy around it, because I think by the letter of the law, if you head the ball from your head to a body part like the arm or so, then it's supposedly not going to be penalized. But I'll be honest, to me, it kind of looked like when you throw the basketball and it gets stuck between the glass and the rim or the backboard. It was very simultaneously. I think if you look at it in the super slow motion, you actually see that I think it came off Can's head, but he really had his chicken wing out. So while I think I would have liked the referee to go into the review area and take a look at it, since it's a very monumental decision. At the same time, it's not like this particular decision now would have ruined my entire week, because it wasn't to me as egregious as the call on Bellingham, to be honest. And it was just a little silly. Can's arm clearly moved into that direction. I don't know how you see it. I just found it very annoying that it happened, and the way it happened. And it was Can, of all people, once again, screwing it up, sort of. What did you make of it?
I was also a bit surprised that they didn't look at it. I almost wanted to say they did, but I think I remember now that they didn't, and then the ref said handball is clear, and now they're checking whether it's offside in the build-up. I don't think we necessarily got any replays there, but I think just generally, in this instance, I would throw the rule book out of the window a bit, because that's just so dumb by the player that he doesn't deserve to get away with it. So if that's by the absolute letter of the law, not a penalty, a big whoop. I mean, just don't do that. Like, he had no pressure to do that.
The last Pollmann Book of Football Rules, Rule 1, if you're a moron, you deserve to be penalized.
I mean, if there's some small section by law that says you can't do that, I mean, that's still don't give the referee the opportunity to get it wrong. Like, there was no one immediately behind him. There was no immediate danger. It was just kind of stupid. And I given that this wasn't the first instance of Emre Can doing something fairly hard to understand in the box in the Champions League knockout stages this season, so within the last 6 weeks or so, remembering back to that Sevilla game, my level of sympathy for him is fairly low right now.
Yeah. I don't want to sound like a reactionary, but obviously I'll do, and I think I'm kind of done with watching Emre Can in the Champions League. I'm totally okay if the...
Well, you're in luck, Stefan, because you're not going to, at least for 18 months or so, 16.
Yes, but what I was saying is, if the quote-unquote transition year, which we will definitely have, does not feature Emre Can, I will not be devastated, is all I'm saying. If he wants to take his experience elsewhere, I'm very much okay with that. Is all I'm going to say. Which is also a nice transition to one Erling Haaland, because I still think we have to talk about it briefly, because there are kind of two things that annoy me. One is that apparently his teammates think that it's smarter to use him as a decoy and then just sort of play it in the space when there's sort of a break or an opportunity where Haaland is not running in, because he obviously does bind some defenders, but I still think that trying to pass it to Haaland is the higher percentage chance, if you will. On the other hand, also a thing that really annoys me right now is is Haaland's body language and his lack of participation, especially against Manchester City. He could have, I think, helped out a little bit more by trying to regain possession and dropping a bit deeper, even though that's obviously the unceremonious part of a striker. But I think if you are, in a situation where the opponent, I think, had 61% of possession and was really turning the screw with every minute, I think there is some criticism in store for Haaland, who, as you said already, did not have the strongest of showings at all. I think he only had 3 touches in the box over 180 minutes, and it's not enough for me. I think both in terms of how Dortmund failed to give him any service, and both in the way Haaland did not really get involved, as we've seen he can get involved in a match, was a bit frustrating to me. Your take?
Yeah, I mean, the fact of the matter is, if you include the World Cup qualifiers with Norway, which I think they didn't necessarily play a murderous row of opponents, he's now gone 7 games without scoring, which I'm sure is a career high for him, given how short his career has been and how prolific he's been in front of goal. 4 of those games obviously coming with Dortmund, a few important games in there. I mean, it's not like he wasn't involved at all. For example, against Stuttgart, he was involved in
against Man City too. In the first leg, he had an assist.
He had the assist for Reus as well, yeah. So, I mean, we are still talking about a fantastic player, obviously, but when you set the bar so high for yourself with your performances, with some of the attitude, I mean, obviously, his reaction to maybe not getting the perfect pass at times. I mean, that reaction has been the same whether he scores 3 goals per game or he doesn't score in 3 weeks for 3 weeks in a row. I mean, that's just the hallmark of a lot of strikers. Obviously, people will perhaps know that I'm watching Inter as my second team, or sometimes it feels like the first team, because following Dortmund as a fan can be difficult when you also work as a journalist. But they have Romelu Lukaku, and he displays pretty much the same, if you want to, negative body language. And because they're winning all the time, nobody's talking about it in a negative way, but rather in, oh, look how much Big Rom wants it, and he's so eager for the championship, which is coming in the next couple of weeks or whenever. So, I mean, the body language part is something I always balk at, but I mean, there's no denying that they didn't get enough performance out of Holland in these 2 games to reach the semifinals. And again, given the circus surrounding him, I think it's only to be expected that criticism will hit him harder than other teammates who did perform under or underperform just as well.
Yeah, I mean, if we talk about players that also didn't really hit their levels, I think Rafael Guerreiro is a very good shot there in the second leg. Given his qualities and the things he has shown before, it was a rather quiet night. But there are several more to mention. But one last point on Haaland, I think. One chicken is a little bit coming home to roost here, in the sense that Dortmund never really had a backup for him, and that he did play a lot of minutes, and he's only 20 years old. And I still think that, Manchester City had the luxury, let's say, to, as you said, throw a game and, rotate and rest a lot of players. And I think on such a high level, those things do make a little bit of a difference. So, if you had the chance to rest him a couple times here and there, or just, cut his minutes a bit shorter, I think this would have helped, is all I'm saying. But yeah.
Are you saying, Stefan, that playing Ansgar Knauf and Steffen Tigges in a Champions League quarterfinal might say something about how the team is constructed?
No, not at all. I would never suggest that. No. Who, me? No.
Yeah.
Of course not. That's the greatest squad building, strategy development, whatever, ever. It's
trust the process is all I'm saying.
Yeah, it's just amazing. Yeah. If only Dortmund would be playing as well as the Philadelphia 76ers this season, that'd be quite amazing. However, not the case. So with all that being said, Lars, we are now taking our focus on what we will do on Sunday, which is watch Formula 1 in Imola. But all kidding aside, Borussia Dortmund do have to play against Werder Bremen, where they haven't fared too well recently. What are we making of this game?
For our listeners who also watch F1, I mean, we are all in agreement, I'm assuming, that Nikita Mazepin will already be out before Dortmund kick off, because there's a 30-minute difference. Maybe Sepp Vettel as well. I keep my fingers crossed because I do not like him.
How can you not like Vettel, honestly? It's one of the nicest guys. What's not to like?
Moving on. Bremen haven't scored a Bundesliga point in 4 games, I believe. I think they have 1 out of their last 5. Conceded 10 goals in those 4 defeats to Leipzig and 3 other teams I don't remember. So what was once a season that was considered to be, a very solid one, and one in which they wouldn't have the same issues as last season, where they only saved themselves in the relegation playoffs thanks to the away goals rule, which I still think is kind of stupid, especially in COVID times. But Bremen now have some level of pressure, which I guess from a Dortmund perspective is not the greatest thing, because we know that Bremen, against a few opponents, Dortmund chief among them, can really excel and show much better performances than the team seems to be capable of. Frankfurt is another example. There's a bit of a rivalry with the coaches as well there. And looky here, Bremen also beat Frankfurt earlier in the year. So it's definitely a fixture after the Champions League defeat, which I think in this podcast a few months ago would have been described perhaps as a trap game, but I think Dortmund don't have the luxury of considering any game trap.
Yeah,
if that makes sense.
Yeah, I totally agree. It totally makes sense. Yeah, I mean, it's obviously always an odd game because I watch Bremen too often for my own liking. I don't know why. Maybe it's down to their schedule, but they're not really a good team. But Dortmund, I mean, they really find ways to screw up against teams that are not good teams. Just think about the Cologne game. I still sort of shudder when.
Which one?
Yeah, both games. To be honest, they were both terrible. I mean, Bremen right now, they're in 13th. You know, they have 7 wins, they have 9 draws, they have 12 defeats. It's I don't know. It's not a fun side. They score 1.14 goals per game, concede 1.54. So obviously, they're not a good Bundesliga side. I don't even know who their best players are right now. Because usually in my book it would be Rashica.
He of one Bundesliga goal this season, which came via penalty in the 1-4 defeat against Leipzig.
Yeah, this guy. But I think the top scorer is Josh Sargent, who I absolutely do not rate at all. So and I think he's level with Füllkrug and Möwald. So yeah, It's a drab Werder Bremen side. Seeing that we sort of have to wrap up our recording, Lars, what's your prediction for a game that I'll probably not going to watch or only on the second screen?
Just real quick, the best Bremen player against Dortmund isn't Rashica. It's without fail Jerzy Pavlenka, their goalkeeper, who also kept out a penalty in the first meeting this season, which Reus then scored on the rebound in Edin Terzic's debut as head coach, which was a 2-1 win, and this time it's going to be a 3-2 win for Dortmund.
Oh, very nice. Yeah, I'm actually going to say it's going to be a 3-1 game. It's a home match for Dortmund, right? Or do I have this wrong? I feel like that maiden win was in Bremen for Terzic.
Yeah, they play at home against Bremen and Union and then travel to Wolfsburg.
Yeah, not that it matters too much because Dortmund's home record this season is obviously not great. Anyway, thank you very much, Lars, for stepping in for Matthias, who's still recovering from his second COVID vaccine shot. So rest well, Matthias. I hopefully will not have any big side effects when I get mine on Monday. I don't know about you, Lars, and when you will get yours, since you are based in Germany, a country which
not is, this year, I don't think.
That's too bad. And now that the contractors of our neighbors start hammering at the deck, I think it's a very good time to wrap this up. So thanks for coming on. We shall be back with a review and the preview of the Bremen match and the Union game next week. So another 2 episodes per week. Anyway, thank you for listening and goodbye.